Most appreciated.
No problem. We're now live, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, so good evening everybody and welcome to the Adult Health and Social Care Scrutiny Board on this Thursday the 19th of August 2021. I would like to make a special welcome to the board of the Children and Young People Scrutiny panel this evening for item number 5, which is the suicide prevention. So the format of the meeting, we'll do the formalities, get those out of the way. We'll go on straight on to item number 5. And then after item number 5, the officers will, our scrutiny support will do a report, and we'll meet as an informal group with key members to put some proposals forward and recommendations. After which people on the Children's and Young People Scrutiny are more than welcome to either stay and listen to the rest of our meeting, or if you've got better things to do or more pressing things to do, then you're welcome to equally leave. So let's start the meeting. We'll get through as swiftly as possible, but hopefully effectively. I'd like to also welcome all the different panels, outside body panels, and people that have attended, especially for this for this evening. So thank you for your attendance. It's very much appreciated. So let's go on to the formalities. Let's just go, if you want to raise a question, at the bottom of your screen there is a reaction button. So if you press that, there is a raise hand facility. If you raise your hand, I will mark down in the hopefully the correct order. So don't have a go if you happen to be slightly in a different order. So I will note those as soon as I possibly can. So item number 1 is substitutes nominated for this meeting, and apologies for absence. I don't think we have any substitutes for this meeting, Janet.
That's correct, Chair. There are no substitutes and no apologies.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Item number 2 is members' interest, for members to declare any appropriate interest at the relevant time. Item number 3, admissions to the public. The public are welcome to watch this on the YouTube channel. And if you are watching, very much welcome your participation. So thank you for that. So we're going to item number 4. Item number 4 is minutes of the Adult Health and Social Care Scrutiny meeting held on the 15th of July 2021. Can we have somebody to propose and second those, please? I'm looking for some hands. Thank you, Councillor Barnes, and thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. And if we can take those as a true record as they stand at the moment. Anyone wishing to make any comments on that at all? Okay, we'll go to the vote on that. So if we can just vote in favour of those. All those in favour, just raise your hand. I can see on screen. Yeah, okay, those are moved. So item number 5 is the main item of the agenda this evening, and it's an extremely important subject matter, one which we really need to tackle and see how we can prevent additional suicides in the future. So item number 5, I would like to welcome Sue Foster, Consultant Public Health. So Sue, I do believe you're going to coordinate this item and help me get through this item as well.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to this really important meeting and important topic area. We have got a presentation that we're going to help manage this item, so I'm going to ask Laura if she can put it up for me, because I don't trust myself.
Just bear with me 2 seconds, I'll just load that now. So, can everyone see that okay? Great.
Yeah. Brilliant.
You just prompt me through it, Sue. Okay.
Okay. If we go straight on to the next slide. So the way we're going to tackle this agenda item is slightly maybe different from what you've done before, but hopefully it will be useful. So I will be grateful for any feedback as well on this. But I'm Sue Forster. I'm interim consultant in public health. I've been here for a couple of months and I'm working here 2 days a week at the moment. And this is one of my topic areas, suicide prevention and public mental health. So tonight, what we're hoping to do is give you a snapshot of the local picture, a bit about suicide prevention and what works. And then each section, we're going to go through what's working well, any key updates and any learning points that we believe that we have already, and then to offer over to counsellors to come in with any questions. So we're going to split it into the scene setting, children and young people, adults, and then some wider issues around West Yorkshire and Harrogate and some of the wider issues. So next slide, please. So I always start my suicide prevention meetings with this saying by Hippocrates, because it goes back quite a long way. But what he said is more important to know what sort of person has the disease than what sort of disease the person has. And this is really important in suicide prevention because there are many people with lots of risks, and we will hear a lot about the risks as I go through. But actually, there is only a small proportion of those who will then go on to take their own lives. And so what we really need to do is really listen to people and where they are. And it's at the heart of whatever we're doing. But also it's not just around medical and clinical services, but it's about every single service that those people might pop into, where they might touch base, and us as individuals and society and communities and what we can all do. So everybody has a part to play in this topic area. Next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot of the data, and you know, for the data and the numbers, it can feel quite hard because behind each one of these is an individual and lots of families that have been affected by suicide. But the top bit of the chart shows where we rank in terms of the England rate, and you can see just down there, it's just showing red all the way through. And the bottom chart shows that, you know, Calderdale has tipped up and down, but generally been above both West Yorkshire and Harrogate Humber rate and also the England rate. But you can see over recent years how it's really tipping up. And obviously this is why it's an area of significant concern for us. Next slide, please. So because the data for suicides, you know, the 2020 data will only come out in September, you know, it's not very real time for us. So we work alongside the police and coroners to try and get a more up-to-date position of what's happening, and so that we can see what the recent trends are. And this is the data for 2021, and it shows that, you know, the number of suicides was still suspected suicides at this point, because they might not have gone through coroner's court for a verdict, but they are still high. The numbers are still high, 31 on this chart. And you can see that males are still a significant issue in those middle-aged groups. So it's following what we know is the trend in Calderdale over the recent years. Next slide, please. So a lot of this information is in your pack, and I don't want to do death by numbers. So I won't go through this in every single one, but what we see is that, you know, Males are a significant issue, or those wider social issues are coming out quite a lot. And what you will see is that people are often using drugs and alcohol at the time or close by the suicide to support them in their feelings that might also contribute to the issue. But living alone and relationships issues are significant. But importantly, a lot of people will take their lives in their own homes. So next slide, please. So what does the evidence tell us, and what, where should we be focusing? I've already mentioned a lot about men and working on economic factors, and we're doing a lot around poverty in this borough, and there's an awful lot of really good work happening that sort of tackles those top two issues, and doing work on complex lives, especially around our drug and alcohol problems. But actually self-harm is a significant predictor, and making sure that we work really well with our CCG colleagues and our mental health services on appropriate strategies for both adults and children and young people, but also really looking at our future generations, and doing prevention in children and young people will really support our future and where we're going to be. So looking at the long-term strategy. Next slide, please. Also, I won't go through every single one of these, but making sure that we get all these things right. There's not one size fits all in suicide prevention. There's lots of things we have to do really well. So our mental health providers need to make sure they're doing everything they can to meet the national standards on suicide prevention, but also working with our media about how they report suicide, so we don't get suicide imitations out there. So, there's lots of different things and strategies we need to have in terms of suicide prevention. Next slide, please. So a lot of this I've already mentioned, but if I was to say there's a couple of things that I would like to be my take-home message, is that the economic cost for everyone, that's one suicide, is 1.67 million, that's estimated. And that, 10 people could be seriously affected by one bereavement. And this might not just be friends and family. We need to look wider than that. It's also maybe the policeman or woman who turns up at the scene, or our very own community wardens. But, personally, I have been bereaved by suicide myself, and I've seen the devastation it has on families and friends. And we just need to do all we can, because for 30 of those suicides, that then increases our risk to 300 other people. And that's 300 in 1 year. This is a cumulative risk. So for every year that will increase. So that could be 600 in 2 years and so on. So the more we get that down, the more we reduce the risk in our community. So next slide, please. That is really a whistle-stop tour from me, but what I would say to you that, it can be quite hard to hear some of those facts and figures, but we have a really fantastic working group in Calderdale. We've reset it up, and they're really engaged in this subject area. So this is a perfect time for us to be at Scrutiny, so that we can understand anything that you feed back to us, so we can embed that into our comprehensive action plan, which fits the national strategy. But the one thing that we do need to do, and this today will help us, is we need everybody to know what their part is to play in this agenda, and we need to improve our communications and awareness of what that is and where people might get help. So that is all I want to say on this. I'm going to take a breather now, and hand it over to yourselves for questions.
Thank you, and thank you for the really excellent presentation. I think it was an excellent overview. So if you can take the screen down, let me just take the screen down, otherwise I've got two people that I can see already that are putting their hands up, which is good. Right, I shall take Councillor Barnes first of all, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a large number of questions, but my first one is, what is the action plan?
So the action plan, I'm sorry, but it might not be out in the public domain, but it covers quite a number of.
Well, my point is that this audit and this report are all well and good, but where's the action plan for us to look at? Where's the action plan for us to check on? A plan needs to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and within an appropriate time frame, so we can assess it as a scrutiny board. I see no action plan here, and I say nothing for us to scrutinise. These are a series of statistics, some of which I'm going to question, some of which I could question in terms of some of the comments made. If I go back to your report and I go to section 5, which says progress to date, says basically we've stopped people from, we've done something on Burdock Way and North Bridge, and we've sent out 2,000 little cards. I don't see a plan. I see a lot of statistics, but I don't see a plan. I was assumed we were going to look at a plan and we were going to be able to review the plan. And then in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, look back on the plan and see what had been achieved and what hadn't been achieved. I see just a series of statistics, and some of them I question. You know, I can go through some of these statistics and some of the comments that you've made within the audit report, and just say there's assumptions being made without any data, you know, without any support against it. But what's the plan?
Okay, yeah, there is a plan, and it's working through the improvement channels. But obviously, because public health has been managing COVID, it's actually just going through the approval processes now.
Are you working on them?
Sorry, so
yes, we are still working on them. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, the action plan is still being worked on, even though it's going through the approvals process. Okay.
Thank you.
When would we expect a plan to be brought in front of these committees again?
We can bring it back as soon as possible. It's actually ready now. So, you know, I'm quite new, so I'm not sure what the process is. So I will double check and make sure that it goes to the proper process and bring it back ASAP. But I can get that back to you tomorrow to say when the time frame is.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. If we can, no, that is one of the action points. So yeah, that'd be good. I'd like to welcome Tamsin Walker to the scrutiny this evening. So thank you, Tamsin, for coming. She's a bit of an expert in this field and has some interesting questions. I've got quite a number of people, so I'll bring you in a little bit later, Tamsin, if that's okay. But just wanted to welcome you to our board this evening. So the next person I have indicating to ask a question is Councillor Hutchinson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Having read the report, I really can't see, I don't get a sense that we understand why the rates of suicide are so high in Calderdale compared to the rest of the country. I quite appreciate that there's many different factors that can contribute to somebody deciding to take their own life, but it would be helpful to know why we are such an outlier so that we can then try and address that. But I don't get that sense. I'd also like to say that at the last meeting, we scrutinised the Burnt Bridges report, which was where 5 young men lost their lives who lived street-based lives. And we commented then at the reliance on signposting rather than referrals, where people who are maybe at very low points in their lives are being asked to navigate their way around the services that are available, and it's their responsibility, that nobody is taking responsibility for their care. And similarly, we also flagged up the deficiencies in the dual diagnosis service, so that people with a combination of mental health problems and drug and alcohol misuse were being batted backwards and forwards between the two components of the service, with nobody really providing a joined up care. So, you know, those are depressingly similar to what we heard in the Burnt Bridges report. I'd also like to question the numbers of times in this report where it says efforts need to be made to target and support this population. These are population that includes people who've had untoward events in childhood, people who are ex-service personnel, people who are struggling with relationships. I mean, how on earth are you going to target and support such a, you know, everyone who's struggling with relationships? It's far too vague. So I do hope that when you come back with the action plan, that we see something that has a greater sense of urgency to it. And what my final question or point is, you've analysed a lot of data here, but I wondered whether you had looked at these individuals, whether there had been any changes in their benefit status in the run-up to the time when they committed suicide, particularly in people with disabilities who may have had changes to their support benefits.
Sue, can I hand over to you to come back on those items?
Yeah, there are quite a, you know, I can see the links with the Burnt Bridges, and I take your point on around people just being signposted, especially when they're at a very low ebb. So we will take those points on. I will also make sure that, you know, the action plan, and I will re-look at it again, that it is absolutely, you know, targeting the right people. But there are things about relationships that in my previous role as Director of Public Health in St Helens, with the highest rate in the country, we did actually do an awful lot with people who were bereaved by suicide, and worked with our communities to raise awareness and do general training that really helped to bring those rates down. So I think there's something about our wider community and how we work with those that will not actually be those who touch, you know, services generally. So I think when we talk about some of the wider issues, that will be where we're focusing rather than, you know, specifically, because that is wide. I take that point.
And the change, and looking at changes to benefit research.
Yes, I'm not aware that I've seen any data on that, Councillor, at the moment, but I'll re-look at the data and see what we have. And I know Jess is also here from the wider ICS, and I'm not sure if she's seen any data on that, but I've certainly not specifically seen any data on change. Now, that might be because we've not got the data, rather than that's not a factor. So I will double check that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got quite a number of people listed. I've got you, Councillor Holsworth, as well. So I've got people listed, but in order. So the next one I've got, I wanted to raise a question. Councillor Rubin, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Hutchinson has said quite a bit of what I want to say, but I do want to say a little bit more about this issue of dual diagnosis, because I think it seems to very often just get mentioned and then get passed over. We have as risk factors substance misuse, drugs and alcohol, and depression and mental health problems. But experience of supporting a close family member is services often still very much work that you can have one of these issues or the other. You either have a mental health issue or you have an issue with drugs and alcohol. And mental health service will frequently basically say, you know, come back when you're sober. There are areas where it's got better, but I still think it's very patchy. And if you have somebody with a problem with drugs and let's say has a problem with alcohol, who has taken an overdose, and you're saying, I can't do an assessment until you're below an alcohol limit. Well, if somebody's alcohol dependent, they'll be in acute withdrawal before you can do an assessment. So you're never actually going to be able to support that person. And that means people with very complex needs fall between the cracks. I don't know, and I don't know if we do know, how far people requiring this dual diagnosis figure in the suicide statistics. But given the vulnerability factors, it seems likely they figure fairly highly. And also, I know this is a generalization, but looking at the sort of the age and the gender factors, I think that, people perhaps with sort of alcohol drug misuse are going to be highly represented. And I do wonder, are we actually making any real progress on this issue of dual diagnosis? Or is it very much, I say, as patchy as people being batted from one to the other and falling through the cracks, as unfortunately I know was experienced a few years ago?
So I know Jess wanted to possibly come in on something as well. So shall we let Jess come in first and then come back on that?
There's Jess, and maybe Janice might want to come in from the CCG on that, which might be covered in the adult section as well.
Okay, Jess, welcome to the meeting. Would you like to come in on that, please?
Yeah, so it was more relating to the point before, actually, around benefits cuts. So there isn't any evidence either nationally or locally that really charts that kind of changes in benefits pattern and whether that has an impact on suicide. But what we do know is financial exclusion and changes in financial standard are significant. At the moment, we're developing a West Yorkshire-wide suicide prevention training plan. So there's a little bit of money to invest right across West Yorkshire in terms of touch points with the system, so that what I mean by that is where individuals who are at risk encounter somebody who might have the opportunity to spot the signs of suicide risk and intervene. We want to support those individuals to be able to recognise that and respond appropriately. So one of the potential beneficiaries of that training might be DWP job coaches or PIP assessors. There's going to be an options paper going to the next suicide prevention oversight group across the region to make the kind of decisions around that. Other common touch points are primary care practitioners. Like you say, we know that most people who die by suicide do go to the GPs in the weeks or months just prior to their death. And we want to really, really engage practices potentially in spotting those signs and making the correct interventions. And you're right, it's absolutely beyond signposting. It has to be a bit more than that, otherwise it's not going to have an impact. On dual diagnosis, I think you're absolutely right. I think we need to really, really link with those drug and alcohol services at place in order to bring people together to provide the right support. So I think you're right, Helen. It's an area that we should focus on, and that's not just in Calderdale, that's in the other places across West Yorkshire as well. I hope that's okay.
Thank you. Janice, do you want to come in on this one as well?
Yes, if you don't mind. So I'm Janice Wootton-Knowledge, Mental Health Programme Lead for the CCG and Local Authority. Just really, as people have echoed, really concerns and the lack of connectedness at times regarding people experiencing mental health issues and substance misuse. We know you've outlined clearly some of the challenges in that area. There's some local work taking place to kind of look at how we build those links and clearer connection. Absolutely, without a doubt, there's much more work to do in this area. I think there's more of a impetus and focus following on from the burnt bridges. So just to kind of just wanted to mention work is ongoing, try kind of bringing services together, but we acknowledge there's much more work to do.
Thank you, Janice. Debs, do you want to come in on this at this stage?
Yeah, it was just to say a couple of things, if that's all right, Chair. Firstly, I've just noticed that so this is an apology, that the two papers for this item that are online are the same document, the suicide audit. And actually there was a document that sort of set out a bit more about the action being taken, and so I'm not sure what's happened there, but it was just to make that point. And then just the second point I just wanted to make was around the dual diagnosis, and I think it's a really important point, and I'm really grateful to Councillor Ribram for raising it. And there are examples, and I know where I was previously, we did integrate the substance misuse services with the dual diagnosis services and the mental health services much more. And I think the next item that we've got on the agenda, which is looking at what we can do outside of hospital and by joining up our community services better, is really about thinking about how we take a person-centred approach. I think we've some way to go, Councillor Ribron, on dual diagnosis, but I do think there's some opportunities to join those services up better so that people are less likely to fall between the two sides, as you quite rightly point out.
Thanks, Deb. I'll just go through the list who I've got at the moment on the list, so you don't feel I'm leaving you out. So I've got Tamsin next, then I've got Councillor Durans, Amanda Parsons-Hulse, Councillor Megan Swift, Councillor, my apologies, Councillor Holdsworth, Councillor Courtney, and Councillor Kingston. So the next one on my list is Tamsin. So welcome, Tamsin, and thank you for joining us.
Hiya. I've got a couple of points. Is it all right if I just go straight through?
Absolutely, go through all them. Yes, okay. Please. Yeah.
So first of all, my understanding is the suicide audit is not a very recent suicide audit. Obviously, please correct me if I'm wrong. And that there may be some data missing from that, and that we weren't able to gather information about race and ethnicity and sexuality. And in terms of real-time data, I think there's still some data missing, which means that we can't respond in real time if there were a cluster of suicides, for example. So that's my first point, is around the data. Second point is around we've been aware for quite a long time that there are gaps in terms of dual diagnosis, and I don't know if there's been much change in that, but I'd be interested to know about that. And also to remind people that dual diagnosis is not always around mental health and drugs. It can also include people who've got like learning difficulties or autistic spectrum condition, sorry. I share some of the same concerns that have been raised in terms of the action plan, in terms of where is it and what, you know, is it measurable and achievable? Because again, going back to the suicide audit, it's been quite a long time since that happened. And it seems like there's been a limited number of actions, although there is obviously there is now a crisis, a voluntary sector crisis service in Calderdale, which is in itself is a big achievement. Then I'd like to sort of ask questions around, you know, what we mean by prevention. You know, people are talking about services, but also we need to think about services pre-crisis. So, you know, what stops people from being in crisis and being suicidal in the first place? Because, you know, it works, it's much more cost effective as well to actually prevent people from getting to that point. And then sort of part of that, the suicide prevention working group, you know, I'd like to ask questions about who's involved, who's missing, because I'm aware that there were sort of various key people missing initially. Lots of people weren't even aware of it. So like, I know people in probation have talked about not being aware of it, for example. So then the other question is about how it's coordinated and who is responsible for making sure that happens. I think that's all my questions.
Thank you, Tamsin. Sue, would you like to try to tackle some of those issues?
I will try my very best. Obviously, the dual diagnosis has been an ongoing issue, and that is something that's just been responded to, but it is an area that needs improvement. On the data issue, the suicide audit is not the most up-to-date information possible. However, and the real-time surveillance does have information missing, but that is one of our actions around improving our data and our data quality to make sure that we can really get ahead of the curve in terms of, you know, why is it, because that was one of the questions earlier, Calderdale is higher, because without our significant data around this, we aren't really getting to the nub of what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, can I just say that when the suicide audit happened, I brought this up with the people who did the suicide audit, and I know that they then were no longer in post, but I did bring up these questions then, and that was a number of years ago.
Yeah, okay. And I promise that I will actually look into this, but obviously in terms of the real-time surveillance, if you have real-time surveillance, you have less need to actually do a retrospective suicide audit because you've got good data at point. And so we will be monitoring things better. So my aim is to get the real-time surveillance as best as it possibly can. It needs to be better than it is now. Because we can't identify clusters at the moment.
And are you looking to record data in terms of race and ethnicity and sexuality and the other things that were missing from the suicide audit?
We would like to do all those, and I know Jess, she said she wants to come on she wants to come back on in relation to real-time surveillance. Jess, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, so just to offer clarity, so we've got a West Yorkshire wide real-time surveillance system. So it's not just a Calderdale, there aren't just Calderdale systemic issues here. There are systemic issues across West Yorkshire. Our real-time surveillance system is police-led, so our core partner is West Yorkshire Police, which is brilliant, and we've done quite a lot over the past 2 years to get some data and to get it weekly, which is brilliant. Collaboratively, we've identified a need to improve the quality of the data, exactly like you're saying, including to improve our ability to identify clusters and contagion, and also to improve the demographic data. We're in a process with that. We've got an action plan, and we've recently appointed a consultant from Wakefield to chair that group to take it forward. So it's not good enough. We know it's not good enough. We've identified how it needs to improve. We've identified an ambitious plan to identify the who's who attempt suicide and don't succeed, so we can intervene. That's the journey we're going on, but it is a bit of a process because the information sharing is very complex. The data is extremely sensitive, and there's been, and we have not had any investment in the recent past until this year to drive it forward. So we're in a position where we can do that now, and I'll be working really closely with Sue to make that happen. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. One of the other things that I managed to miss off the end of my long list was, you know, a lot of the focus when we think about suicide prevention is kind of like about identifying people, but actually, you know, if the services aren't there for people to be referred to, then obviously that's problematic as well.
Thanks, Tamsin, for that. Can I ask the members if you feel that there's anything that's been missed from the answers, if you can email to Mike Lodge, that would be quite helpful. So you know, afterwards, if you feel as though actually it wasn't quite addressed and it needs more in-depth analysis, shall we say, then it would, I think, will be quite helpful. Does someone want to, Sue, do you want to come back on Tamsin's last comment at all?
It was around prevention service as well, pre-crisis, and obviously that is what we really need to do, is get way more upstream in terms of prevention, and, you know, focusing on children and young people. I mean, trauma has been mentioned, but actually if we get way upstream, that is where we will really start. Children and young people and families, because obviously children and young people live with adults, so, you know, we can't forget the fact that, you know, we live with adults in communities. So but that will hopefully be picked up as part of the children and young people's element.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Councillor Durans at this stage, please.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of what I was going to bring up's been covered, but there's just a couple of bits I'd like to add, if that's okay. Two of the services that I think may impact some of our people's kind of crisis mode is one of the gender identity service, which we've actually only recognised in the stats men and women, and we're not recognising genderqueer as a group. We obviously have to recognise in that there is a much higher risk of suicide or risk of suicide ideation within that group. And as well as that, along with the comorbidity kind of side of things, the neurodevelopmental pathway are recognising that, the GP recognising, because I think sometimes we might have some people that don't necessarily recognise the traits within themselves because they've coped so long and they've masked for so long. But I wonder if the partners could start to offer some kind of quick, tick box recognition, because particularly I was thinking with some of them, we do know that they self-medicate and then become dependent on drugs because that's not always recognised or provided. But particularly with ADHD and the impulsiveness, it would be worth recognising if that is a risk factor within suicide. It's not necessarily being planned that way, but it's just an impulsive action during that crisis. So I think a lot of people have covered a lot of that, but I just wanted to add that particular thread, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, thanks for adding that, Councillor. Sue, do you have anything to comment on that?
And no, I mean, obviously the report was quite brief, so it doesn't actually go into the detail of everything, but you're absolutely right around identity and neurodevelopment pathways were brought up in our latest suicide prevention group, as well as an area for us to look at. So thank you for that. We will take those ones on board.
Thanks. Jessica just highlighted just in the chat room that there is a brand new website to highlight the services that are available. The resources we have, the Calderdale Suicide Prevention Group have helped put this together, and there's a link to their website. So just for members to have a look, that is www.suicidepreventionwestyorkshire.co.uk for anyone out in the public equally wanting to look on that website. So we go on to Councillor Parsons-Hulls, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for bringing this report forward. There is some great work going on in Calderdale and going on across the borough, working obviously with poverty issues and supporting children, young people. And like you, Sue, I too have suffered bereavement through suicide, and I now work in mental health as a therapist as a result of that, to be honest. So it's a subject that, I'm very passionate about, and I think that we need to do more. And there's something for me here about, if we are, as the report says, if we just go to report, if most people have been in contact with people in mental health services and primary care prior to suicide, how are we missing this? How can we actually miss that? If somebody comes to me in a therapeutic context and talks about suicide in any shape or form, within suicide ideation, or even, how it's affected, maybe they've known somebody, bereavement, whatever, and they are talking about suicide, that's in the room. It's in the room, and we need to really listen up. I mean, I'm absolutely thrilled that you're bringing this and you're saying, right, okay, we've got to get our professionals on board with this. I couldn't agree more. We shouldn't have to get to the place where, a third of people have got a history of attempted suicide, and then we've got the figures that we've got in front of us, so yeah, it's fantastic. Okay, so if we look at, so I think you mentioned the figures that you were saying was 1.6 million is the cost of one suicide. Obviously that's huge, that's a lot of money, and that's a lot of people's lives affected, as you've said. So if we look at that, and I think Tamsin said as well about the cost effectiveness, you know, is if we do what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always got, kind of thing. So, and I think it's also been mentioned about this person-centered care. So in a way, it's like, if it's this it's a massive cost to our society, then, you know, why are we not providing that long-term psychotherapeutic intervention? You know, obviously people have to want it, but I know lots of people, I have so many clients who want therapy and they can't afford it. Why are we not paying for them to have the therapeutic services that they actually want? So, yeah, as you can see, I'm passionate about this subject. You know, I mean, and obviously don't start me on electroconvulsive therapy or pills. You know, we shove pills down people's necks because obviously we don't know what else to do. And I get that, I get all of that. But really, we need to start doing this differently. The figures are showing us, you know, root cause of mental health condition, deeper childhood trauma, the distress, the abuse, all of the stuff that would, you know, that's there, the abuse that becomes abusers. And then we link it with violent relationships and all of those things. They're all on the same page. We've got to look, as you've said, at person-centered care. And I guess, you know, it's within a medical profession. I get that, you know, I totally understand that, you know. But if we look at, you know, let's look at well-researched trauma therapy. Okay, so I'm going to mention a guy called Dr. Bezel van der Kolk, which some of you are in the profession will know who I'm talking about. He spent his career studying how children and adults adapt to traumatic experiences. And he has translated his findings from neuroscience and attachment research into developing a range of treatments for trauma, stress in both children and adults. This is a guy who set up a very first clinical research centre in the US, okay? And he's doing great work, okay? We have models of this stuff already going on in the world, okay? And I'm sure, you know, I mean, you know, as you know, the trauma is stored in the amygdala. The amygdala is the non-verbal part of the brain. And what do we offer? We offer talking therapies. It's like, no, really, we've really got to look at this stuff is covered by nice guidelines. You know, this stuff is not out there. It's classed at, you know, this creative arts therapies. There's all sorts of things I've probably mentioned before, but there are lots of different alternatives to therapeutic intervention rather than some of the stuff that we're offering people. You know, I had somebody come to me about a year and a half ago, and he was absolutely beside himself. He couldn't get the services he wanted or needed and he couldn't afford the services. And it's like, you know, sometimes I just want to treat people for free, but I can't afford personally to do that. And I'm sure there's an awful lot of other therapists out there as well that, you know, we work person-centered, who would like to be able to support people. But, you know, when we're spending 9.7 billion on looking at figures, and you know, I absolutely agree that this has to be looked at. Of course it does. But we also need to provide the answers for these people. We owe it to them, and we owe it to their families and anybody else who's been affected. So thank you. For doing it.
No, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, no, thank you. We seek your passion. I think those points have been taken on board as far as Sue's concerned. If we can go through the list, if we can ask members, I know how passionate you are, Amanda, so I do appreciate that. If we can ask members to just slightly, so we can get through the agenda a little bit. Councillor Megan Swift, would you like to ask a question or comment?
Thank you, Chair, and I've even remembered to take it off mute on this.
You've done very well tonight, so thank you.
Yeah, this is a subject that gets to everybody, and you know, I can't think of anything more horrible to happen to a family, and I'm not sure. I mean, please don't take this wrong. I know everybody's working really, really hard, but I don't think from what we've got, we haven't got as far as action plans. What we have got to see just what's happening really, and whether it's getting better or worse. I mean, I didn't even know that we had a suicide prevention group, you know, so I'm failing somewhere, aren't I, as a councillor? And a councillor who's been here for an awful long time. But no, I didn't. Might want to know what the representation is on it, but I'll get that from somebody after the meeting. But I don't know where we're going, folks. It's the same as I couldn't work out when we were talking about the 5 deaths. So, you know, everybody was promises and one thing another. It was 2.5 years after the event, and I'm not criticising anybody, particularly anybody who's been in public health and has been trying to deal with COVID. It must be dreadful. But this isn't happening at the moment, or it certainly doesn't appear to be. And as somebody who, like others, you know, we have some connection with somebody who had either tried to commit suicide or committed suicide, and it's heartbreaking. And you know, and goes into all the professional type things. We don't do that. That's not what we're here for. We're here to see that the systems are working. So I would like to see a system that has a report with all the facts, and some way or other things are moving on. So if we get this in 6 months, again, we know what's happened in those 6 months. I suppose the only other point to make is the last meeting we had on suicide was Karen Walker who came along, and she, really good. But to get the number of suicides, she was having to go through the coroner's records and counting where it said suicide, because you might, until after the coroner said that, even if you've jumped off North Bridge, you could have something. It's not classed as suicide. So I suppose we're getting further, but I would like to see us go an awful lot further. And I'm sorry, folks, but
no,
yeah. But I do think in lots of things you're doing a good job.
No, I think that's really valid, Councillor Swift. And I think actually the idea after this is that all the comments will be collated and actually with some action plans. So I think it's really valid to get to, all your comments on board this evening, and let's move forward to say actually we do need to do something about this, and office and work together. This is the whole element. So totally take those on board. Right, we've got quite a few people still left, so I'm still working through. I'm doing quite well. I'm spotting you, and so the next one I've got is Councillor Hallsworth, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of points. Having read the report, it seemed to me that the key indicators of likely suicide were inextricably linked to early years in a home where domestic abuse, domestic violence, or a lack of care were present. In addition, being white, male, educationally underachieving, substance misuse, and the inability to form strong relationships with others and mental health issues were key to the likelihood of suicide. I do understand the idea of removing easy sites for people who are jumpers, but given that 70% of suicides in Calderdale seem to be hanging from within the home, I've got two questions. How can an intervention take place early enough to stop the cycle of domestic unrest leading to the problems outlined above? I know it's a very difficult question, but it seems to me that domestic abuse is really the very start of the likelihood of somebody, principally a male, hanging themselves at a later date. And to pick up on Councillor Hutchinson's point, I wondered why Calderdale has a higher percentage per 100,000 of suicides compared to Bracton and Kirklees. All these areas seem very similar. And apart from Calderdale not being a university town, I wondered if nearby cities such as Leeds and Manchester, who have a much more vibrant social life and vibe, have similar suicide rates. And those are questions really that they're not things I wish I could answer them, but I just wonder how we can intervene at an early enough time in somebody's life to prevent a future attempt or successful suicide attempt. Thank you, Chair.
You know, thank you, Councillor Hodge, with an interesting one and a very challenging one. I don't know if you have anything to add to on that. It's
I think, you know, some of these, you know, because obviously when you're looking at suicide, you're looking at the end of end, and the links with lots of other agendas are in this work. So making the links with domestic abuse and community safety and the way we're working on those agendas is absolutely imperative. And, you know, I would love to tell you why the rate in Calderdale is higher. But I would honestly say that I would be, I can't give you that definite information at the moment, at this present moment in time. I don't think we know definitely why, but we know that there's something going on here. So today, and I know you've said that you've not seen the action plan, but believe me, we do have one. I will make sure that you get hold of that. And today is the start of us resetting. We've got to start somewhere and raise this awareness. So that's all I've got to say at the moment.
yeah, no, perfect. Thank you, Sue, on that one. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. You're doing a great job here. It's quite a difficult one. I've got a couple of questions about data that as well. Are there stats recorded about how many people who've died by suicide that have tried in the past? Is that something that's recorded? So if we have that information. Also, I noticed that there's sort of like an average age, and if you look at the sort of data that's for just the past year, there's no younger people in that that have died from suicide, which is great. But is there sort of data going back further, just out of interest? Obviously, I'm here as a member of the Children and Young People Scrutiny panel, and I'm just sort of interested to know, you know, what the data is, if there is specific data collected for children and young people, and how that differs, and if there are any patterns that are different, and if there are any sort of indicators that are different. You know, because that's obviously the suicide prevention plan or the action plan for young people is presumably going to be sort of. There's going to be some overlap, I would have thought, but I just want to make sure that there is something specific on that. And then my sort of like final point really that I want to ask is that from what I've read in the papers, there's information about socioeconomic status and inequalities and that sort of stuff. It's debts mentioned maybe. But things and is things that I presume sort of things like homelessness and stuff are sort of are monitored, or I hope they are. So if we're looking at some of the action plans, is one of the overall themes going to be as well sort of looking at how we can reduce inequalities? Because if that is an issue, if that has come out in the stats as being an issue, then obviously we need to look at how we can do that. I just want to make sure that that's something that's that's there.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Sue, do you want to comment on those? You just unmute, I'm afraid. Sorry, my apologies.
Okay, there is a wider piece of work as part of the health and the COVID recovery, looking at health inequalities and specifically around poverty. In terms of previous attempts, 33% of in the audit had died by suicide, had a previous attempt, and that's only as good as the records let us know. So that's what we know at a minimum, and definitely in terms of children and young people, I had a meeting with the safeguarding lead to make sure that we link up completely with what's happening with safeguarding issues, both adults, children and domestic homicide reviews, so we can start pull that wealth of information together. And yes, we can look back further, either through CDOT, which is the Child Death Overview panel data, and through our suicide data to pick out the age group of younger people. But as I believe that we're not significantly different from anywhere else in terms of children and young people at this moment in time.
My understanding is that
thank you.
Some of the deaths that may be from younger people, are they recorded as accidental deaths? I mean, does that happen rather than being recorded as suicide? So is that, is there sort of any clarity around that? Because obviously that's a really crucial area in order to help sort of with prevention.
Yeah, I'm also linking in with the coroner around the coroner and how the coroner works. So I'm going to link in with Kirklees, and we're going to have a meeting with the coroner, because there have been instances in the past where there may be a narrative verdict, so it may not have gone down as a suicide. So yes, that is an issue. But actually, the burden of proof has changed now for suicide, so it doesn't have to be, it's proved. Definitely, it can go down as a suicide if the burden of proof is reasonable. If you have a reasonable suspicion, is that is what the reason was for the death. So it has slightly changed now. Whether that is being seen in the children's statistics as of yet, I could not say.
Thank you, Sue. And Councillor Gordon, if you next speak, if you can just raise the volume somehow, it was fairly limited as to what people could hear, but we did get the gist. So thank you for that. Right, Councillor Kingston, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up a bit on what Danielle was saying and Tamsin about what looked to me to be blind spots in the research and the data that's been presented around genderqueer people in particular and neurodiverse people. I also noticed we were given a list of some interventions that were ongoing with happening with targeted groups. For example, Rocked in Brighouse doing a climbing course for women. Something happening for children in schools was a Just a Brew thing, various interventions. And it struck me that list, although middle-aged men represent more than a third of suicides, that list of targeted interventions didn't include anything for middle-aged men, which struck me as a blind spot. Also, that various charitable organisations were mentioned in the papers that I read, and nowhere did I see Andy's Man Club, which I know is doing sterling work in the Halifax and Brighouse area. So it struck me that there are some blind spots in what is being looked at. Thank you. That was it.
No, thank you for that. That's extremely useful comments. Just want to reiterate what you put in the chat room. You put something in the chat comments. If you just want to outline what that is.
Yeah, just to try and add to what we've been saying. So you're right. The rates for Calderdale did rise between 2017 and 2019, but that was mirrored in everywhere across the country, actually nationally. So there was something going on nationally as well as locally. So comparatively, it may be looking worse for Calderdale now, but rates rose across the country. The Public Health Fingertips profile do enable you to do that comparison. And we do need to acknowledge that Yorkshire and Humber, ONS data shows that Yorkshire and Humber does have the highest rates nationally and the highest female rate, as well as the problem with middle-aged men, which is represented elsewhere. So just trying to give a bit, a further explanation there, and I hope that's helpful.
Right. Okay, if members can refrain from going into the chat room, because I'm concentrating on what we're doing on the screen, and so I'm differing from screens to screens, so trying to get all the information onto the public domain. So so if
Sorry
I can go to no, it's brilliant. No, thank you. Councillor Foster, please.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm here from the Children's and Young People's Group, but I would also I want to talk a bit about the mental health programmes, because I think there's an inadequacy in the provision that we have in Calderdale at the moment. IAPT, for example, will refer, and it'll be 8 to 12 weeks before somebody can see someone. They'll offer CBT and very little else. So if CBT doesn't suit someone, which, you know, it's great for some people, it doesn't work for other people, then there's very little other option via IAPT. Often the interventions are online or via Zoom or by telephone calls. If you've got a hearing impairment, for example, that's very, very difficult to manage. I know there's a lot of other providers out there as well. There's Noah's Ark, who are fantastic, and Healthy Minds also, who are just brilliant. But there's just the waiting times for people to access the services. They're too long. People are getting to the point of crisis because they're having to wait for such a long time to get any intervention at all. And if that intervention could happen at the start of when they're starting to feel, okay, right, I need some help now, then we might get to a point where suicides are lower, because we're not at the point at the moment, the length of time, and I'm not saying this is for everybody, but it seems to happen a fair amount, the length of time that people have to wait to get any sort of intervention for their mental health at all, other than going to the doctor and getting another tablet, which doesn't work for everybody anyway. It's just too long, and we're missing a trick. We're missing the point where we can intervene for people and help them before they reach crisis point. And I think that I want to just emphasize that point, because I think it's really, really important. And this is no way a criticism of the mental health providers that are here this evening and that are also around in Calderdale. If anything, it's a lack of funding that will be the main issue. I am quite certain. And what we do about that, I'm not really sure, because the coffers are pretty much dry in the council. But that there's got to be something that we can do to intervene to make sure that people can access support a lot quicker, and get to the point where they're not in crisis before they get there.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Foss. I'm going to bring Johnny from Healthy Minds in at this stage. I know, Councillor Barnes, you are waiting to raise a question, but I think it's a key. First of all, Johnny, thank you for coming this evening. We very much welcome your inputs and working together in the future as well, of course.
Thank you. It was just following on from Councillor Foster's observation there. Yes, provision across the system. It can be difficult to access services, and there are long waiting lists for some of those. I did just want to say from Healthy Minds that we strive to make services as accessible as possible. There are lots of different ways that people can contact us. We don't have any waiting lists. And one of the key services in relation to this conversation is Safe Space, which is available every evening. And there are different ways that people can contact that. And that really is a place where people can come get immediate support and sort of be kept safe. There may be onward referrals that come from that, but the point of it is that it's very contactable, very accessible, and available every evening. So I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny, for pointing that out. It's really extremely useful information, so I very much appreciate that. Right, I'll bring Councillor Barnes before we move on to the next section of our agenda on this item. So Councillor Barnes, would you like to...
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to just I think say a couple of things. I think we need to actually thank Debs for actually bringing Sue into Calderdale in order to look at this problem. It was a brave decision for her to do. and its recognition, I think, of the seriousness of the problem. I think it's almost criminal that we're happy to spend 1.8 million after the event, but not prepared to spend £18 before the event. I know that's a stupid figure of £18 before the event, but you get my drift there. But I think there's a couple of themes that I think we need to be very, very considerate. We need to consider. One is that, you know, the routes can start early, and that's why we bring CYP into here today, because this can start at a very early age and go throughout an individual's life and ultimately culminate in the death and the suicide of the individual. But I think also, and I think this is a comment to Sue, is that there are some similarities here between this and burnt bridges. And I think it's important that we look at those two together in terms of when the action plan comes back for us to look at to compare the two, because there's a number of comments that people have been saying today that actually we said, and that was a very traumatic couple of meetings we had on burnt bridges, quite harrowing at times on that, and so is this, and it's a very emotional subject, and we can see that from people. But I think there's some points in the burnt bridges that definitely relate and correlate here, and actually vice versa, going backwards as well. So thank you, Chair, for that.
Yeah, no, very valid, Councillor Barnes. Neil, welcome from the West Yorkshire Police. Very much appreciate your valuable time this evening to attend. I'm sure you see various issues. So if you'd like to make some comments, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for Sue for inviting me on, and a great asset to the suicide prevention role. Very much so, especially in a partnership work with the bridges that's ongoing at this moment in time. I think what we can all agree with, really, from what I've heard so far, is that, unlike the police in a lot of ways, we're more of a reactive service than a proactive service, really. I think we deal with the aftermath rather than the root cause of the problem. To reassure you, really, we do a lot of work with young people. We're leading the way as the district, as Calderdale, one of the districts with early action with young people. And what we're trying to do there is, when people come to us through the different referral systems that we've got from partners or from police officers who, or if they've been involved in crime for the first time or missing episodes, etc., or ASB, social behaviour, we do tackle in the partnership the root cause of the problem, not the symptom. And that's exactly what we're going to try and achieve, really, here moving forward with suicides. For me, the targeted approach for me is to tackle the general public. We're asking families, really, to look after each other and actually identify the signs and symptoms of somebody who may go down that route of self-harm or then moving towards suicide. So for me, there's a lot of work to be done externally with members of the public and families to make sure they can actually pick up the phone and make the referral and say, look, I think my son, daughter, mum, dad, whoever it might be, needs some help, and know where to get that help. And I think that's what has been quite clearly said right from the start. So just to assure you, sorry, come in there, sorry. No, just to assure you, really, that we're working extraordinarily hard with the police liaison nurses. Mental health nurses are in our stations. They're part of the team. 6, 12-hour shifts, night shifts every single night. So be assured that between those hours and even during the day, we have got that professional advice and guidance around anybody we go to police-wise that's in mental health crisis. Because detaining somebody on Section 136 is not always the way forward. So we need to know from them what's the best approach and what we should do with that individual moving forward. And I'm glad to say that there's not many detentions of 136 are made without that intervention and advice and guidance prior. So that's working really extraordinarily well. So yes, you'll be aware that we are working closely together in a group trying to tackle the bridges. Let's get a skeleton out of the closet. We have got a problem with the bridges. We have. It's quite clear, and Sue's come as a real asset to, as I said, to public health, to try and look at how we tackle collectively the issues on that bridge, whether it's engineering, and Debs has been great as well with getting all this sorted, whether it's engineering around it, whether it's target hardening on them, whatever we can do to try and reduce the magnetism towards the bridges, because the calls for service, I share all the calls for service and data with the group, and there's nearly one every day, every month, calls for service. There was one 3 hours last night, 10:30 to 1:30 in the morning, where we're shutting bridges down, we're getting negotiators out, etc., etc. and it just cannot go on. We need to try and do something more to stop those calls for service. And like we've said already, the 1.67 million per suicide. Well, if we put 1.67 million into either bridge or something, then we can maybe do something to stop the magnetism towards it. But be assured, please, that we're doing all we can in that suicide prevention group with Debs and Sue and other members, Highways and all the rest of it, trying to look at the solutions around the reducing the magnetism towards these bridges and stopping people from jumping off them or attending them in the first place. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Neil. That's really important, and I guess there's a hidden cost as well, and that's the hidden cost of supporting your police officers when they've had to attend as well, really, which need.
Can I just come in there? Fantastic point. Sorry, I won't take one at a time. But what we've all talked about is people who are in crisis, and what I need to be cognizant of, and as in my partnership work, is to make sure that the younger generation of officers we're getting through now, they maybe, if they've been rude, of the same coping mechanisms that we might have had when we were younger, and they are going to these jobs where people are jumping off bridges in front of them, or they're going to these hangings in houses, etc. And it's pretty much horrific. And what we do see from that is that we do get wellbeing issues and mental health issues stem from officers going to those type of jobs. Luckily, unfortunately, we do have the trauma and incident management system, the peer support system, the employee assistance program. We've got all these different facets to actually understand and sit down and talk it through with people, make sure they are signposted into services where they need it. And the new Calderdale Cares for Us project that I'm sat on as well, which is very exciting. Johnny's here from Healthy Minds. It's a fantastic piece of work. That money that came through is actually helping those in the public service that do actually need that bit of help and support from COVID. In other areas that, for example, it could be officers visiting people are hanging or onto bridges, all that sort of stuff. So we need to be cognizant of our staff and our friends and our colleagues as well at the same time. Thank you.
Absolutely, no, a good point made on that. So this point we're going to the next section will focus on children. So is that right? I'm hoping I'm leading in the right direction.
Yes, I'm just wondering, because there's been an awful lot of questions that have covered quite a lot of the wider actions, that whether I can bring in Janice from the CCG to actually discuss what we're doing around children and young people specifically, and adults. Maybe we can cover them both quite succinctly, because some of the points have already come up in this more holistic session. Is that okay?
That sounds perfect to me, and you're quite right. It's quite a large, it was really useful to have this first section as to and a wide variety. So Janice, welcome once again. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I think kind of as we've kind of continue with the conversation for the past hour or so, it's highlighted kind of, I think, some key themes that I just wanted to kind of pull together. I think, primarily, I think what I wanted to kind of just raise from a children, young person and adult perspective is that importance of the kind of working from that kind of prevention, early intervention, and building kind of the resilience of our children, young people, adults. And actually the other part, I think, increasingly we're kind of looking at is also staff across the sector, from our emergency colleagues to kind of the staff who are working in care homes, etc. Because I think increasingly there's enormous kind of pressure on people's emotional health and well-being. So it's from that upstream perspective that what we need to do is, as much as we're able to do at that front end, I think kind of we've already a bit or briefly mentioned kind of some of the highlights or some of the elements that are working really quite well at the moment are around this support offers into schools. And the kind of the rolling program around that, and which will increasingly kind of reach out to kind of more skills as we go forward, and that partnership approach to working with kind of school staff, carers, parents, kind of building kind of people's confidence and skill set to be able just to kind of talk about as well people's kind of ability to have those discussions and conversations around emotional health and well-being, and kind of just feel comfortable to kind of do that. I think partnership working and working together across the partnership is absolutely imperative for this agenda. And we've got some incredibly helpful kind of partnerships with our third sector colleagues. Obviously, kind of, Johnny's mentioned the offers and the services, what's provided through kind of safe space, absolutely incredible kind of support and immediately available. We've also got kind of new developments over the past year around the 24/7 mental health helpline, and that provides kind of support, signposting. It's also really linked in to other parts of our system. We're really mindful this is about kind of working alongside and with people to support them into the right kind of areas to get the right support. We do have challenges, without a doubt. It can be confusing and sometimes a challenge to navigate, but it is about trying to build those linkages across. There's been a number in kind of children and young people services and a lot of early intervention, kind of self-management, self-help programs, one being kind of Which Way Up, which is a 12-week rolling program aimed at 13 to 19-year-olds in crisis or a risk at self-harm. That's something what's got really great outcomes for. Comms, I think comms and engagement is always a struggle for us. It's something we work really hard to kind of try and work with. We've got a great website, Open Mind, the Young Persons Open Minds Partnership, Calderdale website. That's kind of got so many resources there. We just need to kind of ensure that people know what's available, how to access it, etc., etc. Similar work, I know Neil's just mentioned the work, what's happening. Yes, Neil, I was going to, yeah, that's the other one I was going to mention. So thank you for the reminder. The work around Night Owls, which is a relatively new, I think it's been kind of over about 6 weeks now. It's an overnight helpline, kind of telephone support line for children, young people and carers and parents, which is really useful. I think in terms of, Neil's already mentioned the Calderdale Cares for Us initiative, which is an amazing array of kind of different kind of ways of staff at kind of in its broadest context. There's some wider initiatives that I'm sure Jess is going to mention, which is looking at kind of some very targeted work for staff in care homes. So there's some work around caring for you, again, reaching out across the board. But I think my kind of takeaway messages are the importance of kind of going at the prevention, building up kind of prevention, early intervention, self-confidence, self-ability to kind of ability and feeling confident to have those conversations. And the importance of working across the system in partnerships and actually really having a really clear focus around, or a constant focus around, how we are communicating and engaging so people understand, kind of are aware of how to access support. I'm really, really aware that was such a kind of potted history, but hopefully that's given you a sense of kind of some of the, at least the themes and the approach that we're kind of taking. Can I just add, I'm really mindful that there's going to be a paper coming to, I think it's Children's Scrutiny in September, looking at an overview of children and young people's services and learning from COVID over the last 12 months. That will provide a lot more detail, but if that's okay, I'll stop now.
Thank you for that. Yeah, no, that's most appreciated. Councillor Megan Swift, you put your hand up. Do you still have a question or not? You're on mute, I'm afraid, sorry.
They keep moving around on the screens, don't they?
They do.
It's really just picking up on something that Johnny said, and I know because I know somebody who works there that healthy men keep having, like everybody else probably, keep having to go out and try to get funding or this this bit of what they'll do has to stop, and this bit of it, and then hopefully somebody comes in at the last minute and gives them some more money. But this doesn't just happen to those. You've got to wonder how all these people that we're all saying really got to work with, that sort of thing. And I agree totally. But why, when you're spending half the time trying to make sure that they can fund staff to work with people who are struggling, there's got to be a better way.
Thank you, Councillor Swift. Janice, do you want to come back on that at all?
I think it's obviously kind of quite it's something what we're very kind of mindful of, and it is the challenge across the system at the moment.
Yeah, no. Councillor Courtney, would you like to come in at this stage?
Yeah, thank you. Is that any better?
Better
is that better in terms of my sound?
Better,
yeah, great. Okay, yeah, I've changed hardware. So in terms of what we're looking at for children and young people and how we can go in and support them. So we're looking at, there's work in schools, work in children's homes, and that's fantastic. But my question would be around, so if you're going into an LA controlled school or you're going into a local authority controlled one of our children's homes, then obviously we can direct staff to make sure that they get the training, and we can make sure, and we can review that, and we can, sort of assess the impact, hopefully that's having. But my questions are around the private care providers that are both situated within Calderdale, but also our young people who are out in other authorities, where we maybe don't have this. I mean, how much control do we have about how much we can encourage or ask or demand that staff in private children's homes or private sort of settings, how much can we make sure that children either based in Calderdale or from Calderdale that are being looked after out of authority, that they are getting that sort of support as well, that the staff looking after them in those homes are also getting this training and are also able to support them. So I suppose it's about, it's great to have plans around training for staff to support young people, but we need to make sure that really gets out into all of those if we can, and I just want some reassurance about that, please.
Fabulous. I was looking for Julia Jenkins, and there she appears. So Julia, please.
Oops. Oh, I am off mute. Thank you, Chair. Yes, yeah, just to come on that question from Councillor Courtney, whether a school is maintained or run by a multi-academy trust, the relationships in Calderdale, if that child's been educated in Calderdale, is very good around mental health support and services to schools. I think your question, Councillor Courtney, is around what about those who aren't in that family network of Calderdale schools? So you're looking at your private providers, both for residential children's homes for children in care, but also private schools. Any child that is in care has a care plan. And that care plan is very, very specific about their therapeutic needs, and the therapeutic needs have to be met. And in Calderdale, we have our own therapeutic team for our children in care. So if we placed a child outside the borough because they had a lot of additional needs that we couldn't meet, we would make sure that therapeutic support was available either in that placement or locally to that placement, and other councils will be doing the same. I think it's quite robust around child care planning. There's an independent reviewing officer that looks at the care plan for each child, looks at their progress at every review and makes sure they're getting the right support and the right services. I think if a child is outside the borough in a special school, again, the education, health and care planning process for special educational needs also makes sure that the health needs, the emotional needs of that child are being met. So I think both for external residential, for residential private, and for private schools for special educational needs, I think it's covered through the care planning and the reviewing mechanisms that are quite robust. And I think the other mechanism that comes into play is Ofsted. And Ofsted will always look at the kind of, the emotional well-being of both the team, particularly during COVID, the teaching staff team, but particularly the emotional well-being and resilience of the children in that school, and what help are they having around relationships, etc., and their emotional well-being, what support services are there. And many schools, particularly in the private sector, do employ, and many grammar schools do employ their own counsellors, their own people on site. I think it is pretty much recognised everywhere that if you don't feel great, you're not going to learn very well. So I think there's been more and more investment over the years into the emotional well-being side and the care for children in terms of their resilience and emotional strength, as well as attainment. So, you haven't got the very hard focus on attainment as much as you used to. It's more of a balance of actually supporting children with their resilience and their, as they grow up as well. I hope that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Again, I'll bring Jess and then John, and I've got yourself down, Councillor Hutchinson, but it's always quite good to get the partners involved. So Jess, can I, you had the point to raise, yeah?
So it's just going back a few points, I'm sorry, around staff and staff wellbeing. There's NHS England have invested some money in a mental health hub for health and social care staff right across the system. So that's regardless of their employer. And some of that money will be earmarked towards specific interventions around men who work in our system and men who are most at risk of the poorest mental health and suicide. And so we're hoping to bring the best of the voluntary sector offer to men who work across health and social care. That's coming soon. And also all of the services that people have outlined here today. So whether that's Andy's Man Club or Night Owls, which is incidentally a children, young people service open to neurodiverse and children with autism, or the crisis service like the Safe Space, all of those are on the website that I put in the chat earlier on. There's one central portal for information for anyone to use here about where to go for help and support at what time of the day and for what kinds of people. So we'd really welcome any feedback about that website from anyone who might be watching on YouTube or anyone in the room here today. And there's an email address to contact us, and we will do our best to make that a really useful resource for everybody in Calderdale. Thank you.
Thank you for all that. Johnny, would you like to come in at this stage as well?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sort of following on from what Councillor Swift just pointed out, which is about the sort of consistency and sustainability of services in here that support this whole issue. Ultimately, I think we all understand that we reduce suicide if we can prevent people feeling that they need to go and jump off North Bridge as a solution to their problems or take their lives in whatever other way. So part of that is about making sure that people have the information about services that are available. I think one point on that is that the information can be quite overwhelming. So my plea here would be to try to keep that information simple with just a few sources who can then connect them with the wider offers. I think one of the things is that people can be very overwhelmed by a huge array of, you can contact these people or these people or these people. So there's one thing there about getting the information to people in the first place, but the other is the assumption that the services that are contained in that information continue to exist. So in terms of an action plan or something like that, it's very hard to put things together and say that this support is available when certainly in the voluntary sector, and this isn't just Healthy Minds, but we operate in a very uncertain funding environment. Some of the funding cycles are very short term, they're non-recurrent. I can't say that all of the services that we currently have on offer will exist this time next year. So in terms of articulating an action plan and saying that this is the support that's available for people, it's very difficult to say without some sort of sustainability in there that remains the case. I know that there aren't easy solutions on all of that, but I think it is important when we're talking about these things to consider the stability of services, the role that they provide across the system as a coordinated effort, working together. But it's those important elements, and where one of those falls down, what does that push onto other services? These are the other considerations that we need to take into account in putting an action plan together.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny, for that. That's important. Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard the impact that terrible occurrences in the formative years of children stay with them through their life and have an impact on their subsequent risk of suicide. But one of the main areas where integration seems to be sorely lacking is in that transition between children and young people's services and adult services. People have a tendency to drop off the edge of the service provision. So what assurance can we have that this process of integration that we're going to be talking about later on this evening is actually going to integrate children and young people's services with services for troubled adults?
Good question, Councillor Hutchinson. Who would like to answer that particular one? I'm looking around the room.
For the police side of it, I mean, the whole ethos of early action with young people is to make sure that they do transition from young people into successful young adults. So that's the whole point of us getting these young people early, getting them before they're not 4 or 5 crimes down the road. We get them the first crime offence, the first missing episode, the first time they've committed an antisocial behaviour event. We get them really early. We work with them, and it's hard for us to performance manage, you see, because we will only see 10, 15 years from now when we've got successful adults that have not recommitted or committed an offence again from the first time we actually dealt with them. But we are committed in making sure that there's loads of programmes of working interventions. For example, we've got we are working with ROCT at the minute, doing climbing stuff with children. We link really well with the schools as well, making sure they visit our early help website where all the programmes of working interventions are on that website for the schools to actually use themselves to actually present to the children what it's about. Missing episodes, it could be sexting, it could be all sorts of different stuff that's going on at the moment. But the ethos of our early action is to try and make sure that they are going to have the opportunities to transition from that young person into a successful young adult. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I'm going to bring in our wonderful Director of Public Health, Debs Harkins. I didn't formally introduce you before, just for the members of the public. So Debs, the floor is yours again.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. So it was just to answer, I guess to add to what Neil's just said. I think, we are going to come on to have a conversation about the sort of the integration work that we're doing. There's a few elements of this for me. I think it's really simple in one level. If we think about the outcomes that we want to achieve with people, rather than the starting point, the things we do, then and we also personalise the things we do. When people do need help, we do that in a personalised way. And finally, if we take a trauma-informed approach, so we think about and question why are people behaving as they're behaving, what might the challenges be, and we really seek to understand the challenges that people face. I believe things like transitions can be overcome. Challenges about how our services don't fit together can be overcome because we're putting people at the heart of it and we're thinking about the things we want to achieve. So just to give an example, thinking of an example and thinking about suicide, preventing suicide, we know that things that happen in childhood can influence on resilience and ability to cope when there's challenges in adulthood. that potentially might increase the risk of somebody taking their own life. If we're focused all the time on the difference we want to make, on reducing suicide, and we really try and understand those issues, then I think that enables us to join up the services that we provide in a different way, and soften the boundaries. It's a little bit like the conversation we had earlier about dual diagnosis, isn't it? It's softening the boundaries between services because we're thinking about the person and the difference that that person wants to make to their life, or we want to work together with that person to make a difference. So I know that sounds very motherhood and apple pie, but I do think that if we take that approach, which is what we'll be talking to you about later, we can soften some of those boundaries between where some services start and others end.
Excellent, thanks, Debs, for that. Councillor Ridwan.
Thank you, Chair. I know this is purely anecdotal, but among people I work with in colleges, a lot of people have felt, as we've come out of COVID, mental health issues are one of the major challenges that they're facing, and that they've had to take quite different approach to young people in terms of how they manage in the classroom, or how they deal with things like deadlines, because they realise that people's mental health is fragile. And I would just like to know, in terms of education and COVID recovery, are we looking at things like the impact on young people's mental health and how we support them through this?
Julie, can I bring you back in on this one, please?
Yes, of course you are. Of course you can, sorry. Yeah, Councillor Ridwan, we've had quite a few updates, haven't we, at Children's Scrutiny from Leslie Bowyer, because we've got quite a comprehensive recovery plan. And it does cover, a big part of it is around the emotional well-being of teachers and actually children in school as well. And it comes back to that point I was just saying a few minutes ago around that. If children are not able to sit down and concentrate and are triggered in class and they're not going to be able to learn. But we know that COVID has taken its toll and will continue to do so in the new term as well, that we know things will still be quite challenging for our schools and our pupils to manage as the COVID rate remains persistently high at the moment. But it is there as part of the recovery plan, both looking at the well-being of teachers, but also more importantly, looking at the well-being of children. The government have put quite a significant amount of money directly into schools funding so they can support their mental health, the resilience and signposting and training teachers. And just to mention around suicide prevention that we've been discussing tonight, it's really important that teachers are able to spot the signs, that they feel confident and they also know what to do and where to go. But also that young people who are expressing any worries or concerns around self-harming, that we are able to get that support directly into school. So yes, funding has gone to schools from the Department for Education, and it is a huge priority for us going forward. And we know this is not a quick fix. We know it's going to be years for young people and indeed all of us to get over the very long pandemic and the impact it's had on learning and attainment for children.
Thank you, Julie. Councillor Durans.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. Again, I will come back to my neurodiverse kind of thread. And just to let you know, I probably should have shared it earlier, but I am involved with the National Autistic Society locally. So I've got children that are neurodiverse as well as that. That's why I'm a parent volunteer with them. I don't feel, with my experience of some of the services we're talking about and with other people's that have been shared, that's always the feeling of the outcome of the service. I think there's definitely improvements and there's definitely a want to kind of recognise extra need, but often there's difficulties with packages of care, particularly with CBT and things, because if you have a social communication or a communication or both barrier, and you're expected to kind of be improved within 6 weeks, and it's taking you 5 or 6 weeks to even begin to, open up, or you've got a language barrier. And I want to say situational mute rather than selective, because I don't think it is selective. I think it's depending on the situation that the barrier might occur. And I think that needs to be addressed. And I understand that often delivery is about outcomes, but sometimes those outcomes, they will come, but they take a bit longer, but the impact is still very much needed. The risk is much higher for some of our children, as I said earlier, particularly if we're talking about, you know, impulsive, not necessarily considering, or masking. You know, some of our children might be in crisis for a lot longer. If we think of the swan or the Coke can effect, they are absolutely masking that level of crisis, and we're not being aware. I think the new ideal about having more support in schools is key, because our teachers are going to know our children much sooner and recognise the needs much quicker than what we would expect. But yeah, I would like to see more work around that, because that element of risk is definitely increasing with our younger ones. And adding to that, when we was all at school, we could separate ourselves and go home at the end of the day. Social media now doesn't allow that to happen. There is a constant drip feed of this no cut off, and that really panics me, because our young people, when we say we're needing to build up their resilience, it's not necessarily that they're not resilient, it's that they haven't got an element of that's enough now. I need to get away from this. So yeah, that's kind of my points, I guess, I'm trying to make about, you know, there's lots of things that you're saying, and that's all great. That person-centered delivery, that element of holistic, you know, support, it doesn't always feel like that for some of us that are on the receiving end of that. I know there is work going on to try and get that improved, but that's kind of what I just wanted to offer. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Can I bring Sue back in at this stage, please?
Yeah, I'm just wondering about because obviously we split this into a third, and we've not quite gone to plan, but that's absolutely fine, because these things don't always go to plan. And I think most of the people who I brought in to support have actually said what they were going to say anyway, as part of the natural conversation that's come with all the questions. So I wasn't intending on bringing anybody back in, but I know that still a few people who want to just offer their questions or comments. So unless anybody has a burning desire that I've missed something, I will be happy to take the questions and then complete this section, if that's okay with you, Councillor.
Yeah, that's my thoughts, actually, exactly my thoughts. So well thought out. So I'll just bring in, I've got Councillor Barnes. Jess, have you kept your hand up from a previous session, or do you want to indicate to speak as well? Sorry.
I'm so sorry, I didn't realise it was up.
No, I just didn't want to. I didn't want to exclude, but equally, if we can move on as well. So, Councillor Barnes, first of all, please.
The return of the legacy hand. It was actually something that Julie said that triggered something, and I'm actually going to refer to adults now, but actually it's from something that Julie said, which is, I don't want to use the word easier, but within our schools, we have a very, we speak to teachers, we speak to schools. When people get to 18, 19, 21, and they go and work in large organisations, they move out of that. And I know from personal experience that, I know one of our large employers found last year that a lot of, they employ a lot of people in their 20s, and they were struggling. People were living at home, not having the same social interaction, same social intercourse that they had before, and they actually brought people into work. Totally COVID safe, totally COVID secure work. I know they work with public health in order to make that case. But what are we working with some of our large employers as people transition through that sort of their 20s, where you probably are at risk of starting to feel that way, which might not manifest itself for 10, 15, 20 years, which Neil was quite right in his statement early on. Are we working with some of our employers in that field?
Good questions. Sue, do you want to come back on that?
That's an absolute yes. We've got Lloyd's, the biggest employer, who's on our suicide prevention group, but that is not the only area that we're working in, and our aim is actually to up the actual work that we do with our businesses, both large and small to medium businesses. Yes, exactly, and especially those that employ people who have specific risk factors.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Parsons-Halls, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, some really good stuff going on. It's fantastic to hear that we've got this access. You can access services 24/7 in Calderdale. It's absolutely fantastic. I'd like to just come back to some of the stuff that Danielle was just talking about neurodivergence, because I work out of area for obvious reasons. We work over in Oldham, and we work in special needs schools and places like that, and we work non-verbally. We deliver a service, a project that's funded by Children in Need, and we're working with people using something called dance movement psychotherapy. It's all non-verbal, and it's a way of young people being able to talk in movement, being able to express themselves without having to articulate the feelings into words. So it can be movement. It's all held in a very safe space, and it's not just delivered by one therapist. There's a lot of therapists in the room. And then we also work with the teachers, and what a lot of teachers feed back to us, they say, we don't have the skills to deliver the stuff that you do. And very often as part of the project, we will do a bit of training. But, a lot of us have had 500-600 hours of psychotherapy, and I've got a master's degree and everything else. And, they come to us saying, give us some ideas of what we can do. But the thing is if you're holding somebody in very deep psychological distress, you can get out of your depth pretty quickly. And it has been said before that you can cause damage, as well as, obviously good intentions are the best intentions, but, you really do need that support as a teacher to be able to deliver that sort of therapeutic service. So, yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on that, really. And if I may, a second comment. Somebody once said to me that if we had an emotional hospital, so similar to we have a physical hospital for physical things. And I think I just come back to what Johnny was saying before. There's something about all those services are quite spread out. And if we had a place to go to, like an emotional hospital, a place where we could go in crisis, it would be something, so it's like a place to be cared for. We all have, well, obviously we've been talking about people who have very deep psychological distress, but we all go through life events, and whether it's a bereavement, there could be a bereavement service. Obviously we have that already. Whether it's a divorce or a suicide or something that's gone on in our lives, I do think there's something about it being called an emotional hospital. It makes it almost more accessible to people who might not necessarily want to, let's just say, go to therapy. Yeah, that word. Anyway.
Yeah, we get your point. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, we get your points on board. I think we get the gist of it, which I think will be come out in the some of the reports. So, members, I think it's been a really good a session in relation to suicide prevention. I really want to just especially thank all our partners. Let's thank Jess, Johnny, Janice, Neil, and of course our officers as well. It's been extremely valuable, and most importantly, Sue for guiding us through this and helping me. She's done a wonderful job at helping me to get through this particular item. We've done quite well, actually, considering the length of the topic. So members, what it leaves us down to is actually the Scrutiny support are going to come up with a report on this whole session, bringing out all the key elements, at which stage afterwards we'll have an informal meeting of the CYP and equally the adults board to come to some recommendations, which will include, what are the what's going to happen next. So thank you, members of the CYP, for joining our scrutiny. It's been a real pleasure to have you on board this evening and your comments. Thank you, Tamsin, for joining as well with your expertise. It's really important that we move and work together and move this forward and try to certainly reduce it. We'll probably never eliminate suicide. That's really unfortunate part, but we do want to work to certainly reduce it vastly. So thank you, partners. Thank you, members. Members of the Children, Young People Scrutiny Board, you are more than welcome to stay, of course. But if you have other plans, then feel free to go. So thank you on that one. So it leads us on to item number 6, which is transforming community services. So just seeing who's leading on this. My apologies on this one.
I think Nigel's leading on this one, Chair.
Nigel, thank you, Lauren.
Hi there. Hi. We've got some slides. I don't know if the administrator is going to help
Just
display
bear
the
with
slides
me,
for us.
Nigel. I'll just load those on, and if you just let me know when you want me to move on, I can do.
Okay. So thank you very much for inviting us this evening. We're going to do a quick presentation. And we really wanted to introduce to you the Calderdale Collaborative Community Partnership. So just as a way of setting the scene, you'll all be familiar with Calderdale Cares, which is obviously Calderdale's integrated model of healthcare and health and well-being in our community. Obviously, community services are quite central to the delivering of the Calderdale Cares outcomes and in enabling the sustainability of the local health and care system. The CCG developed a care closer to home prospectus, which was to strengthen and coordinate care outside of the hospital and to deliver a wide range of services to those with complex care and health and care needs, to promote well-being and prevention. By that I mean keeping people well, treating and managing acute illness and long-term conditions, and supporting people to live independently in their own homes. So we've been building our ambitions to deliver a more and better support of services across our community and in primary care. So with that in mind, in early 2020, the 8 main partner organisations that provide community services in Calderdale came together and formed the Calderdale Collaborative Community Partnership. So those 8 organisations are the Community Directorate of Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust, the mental health provider, which is South West Yorkshire Foundation Trust, the 5 primary care networks that cover Calderdale, the council services, the Voluntary and Community Calderdale organisation, which is our 3rd sector organisation, the CCG, Locala, and the Community Pharmacy West Yorkshire. So all those organisations have come together and agreed to work together to promote joined-up working and to promote an integrated collaboration. And the idea is to cross boundaries so that we work across organisations, we work across physical and mental health, and work across health and social care. So building on the lessons that we'd learned in COVID, we wanted to improve services, and we wanted to move towards working in a much more proactive and preventative way. We wanted to start applying the principles of population health management. And we've got examples of that now happening across our 5 PCN areas. So we've got projects happening in the central PCN that are looking at diabetes and weight. We've got frailty projects going on in both in the upper PCN, in lower PCN, and in Calder and Ryburn. And then in the North PCN, we've got mental health projects happening. And they're all using the principles of population health management. We've got particular programs of work happening under the Calderdale Collaborative. So particularly, we've got a big project working on enhancing healthcare in care homes. And we're also developing across the council and health services, an urgent community response service. And we will be moving soon into developing further anticipatory care projects. So that's an introduction to the work that the collaborative is starting to do. I don't know if Deb wants to add to that.
Thank you. Thanks, Nigel. If we can move on to the next slide, Lauren, please, that'd be great. Thanks. So just to set out really sort of clearly, I guess, what Calderdale Cares it wants to achieve, I guess the difference that we want to make through joining up, particularly community services. So this is what we've done is by gathering together all the engagement and listening to clinicians and residents about the sorts of way that healthcare and wellbeing services work. We've developed this outcomes framework. So the first bit of it is about better well-being for everybody. So that's better, healthier people. And a narrowed gap, less reduced inequalities in health, and also really importantly, as we've been talking about in the earlier item, really good physical and mental health for children and young people as well as for adults. The second sort of chunk of outcomes, if you like, the difference that we want to make is really around, this is about community services. So this is about harnessing the strengths and the contribution that communities can make. So this is about we want a thriving voluntary and community sector. We want people to be connected and support in their local community to help them stay independent and well. And again, it really does build on some of the stuff we were talking about in the previous item, doesn't it? And also we want people to be empowered to care for their own health and well-being. Then the third chunk is around seamless services. So this is really about the joining up of the services. So we want all of the services, healthcare, well-being services to be easily accessed as close to home as possible. We want people that have got long-term needs to receive good continuity of care. That's what they tell us they want. And they want to only tell the story once. And then people with more complex needs, what they want is to receive coordinated care from across the partners, from across the Calderdale Cares networks, whoever the organisation is. And particularly they want a named care coordinator that will help them navigate the system. And then finally, the final sort of difference we want to make is more about what the services will be like. And this is really about working together to make the change. So this is about staff working across organisational boundaries, in teams without walls, with the person and patient at the centre. Information to be shared across the network and more people to get support digitally. Buildings to be shared. And also the collaborative Calderdale Community Collaborative as a real vehicle for change, and that's what we'll come on to. And then just really briefly, if we move on to the next slide, Lauren, just to explain a little bit more about what we mean by the population health management approach, which is the approach that we use in. So what we've done this year in 2021, building on what we've learned from the real successes actually, from when we've got a really focused outcome that we want to achieve, we really are able to join up services, and tackling COVID-19 is a really good example of that. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to explore how we can expand the integration of preventative services and programmes with other community services to achieve those outcomes that I've just gone through. And it's important really important that we do that if we're going to make sure that our services are sustainable in the future. So enabling people to be independent and well, it costs less than providing hospital and social care, and it enables specialist resources to be preserved for high quality acute services when people need them. So when people are really ill and do need hospital or really specialist services, we want to be able to afford those. And by helping people stay out of hospital and independent and healthy, we can enable those services to be more preventative. So what we've done in terms of that model that you can see on the slide, it's been developed really to help us apply a population health management approach to the achievement of the outcomes that I've just talked through. So what we want to do, if you look at the triangle, we want to keep as many people as possible healthy and independent for as long as possible by joining up services and programmes. And what you can see is we want to keep people as low on that triangle as possible. So when people potentially maybe move up a step, we want to work together, collectively, to help them move down, be as low in that triangle as possible. But as well as doing that, we want to help people. We want to address the root causes of poor health as well. So if you look at the left-hand side of the triangle, it's really recognising, and again, the suicide prevention conversation we just had is a good example, isn't it, of that actually debt and poverty and substance misuse and some of those challenges are actually driving and creating and driving some of the ill health. And equally on the right hand side of the triangle, we want to connect people to the support that's available in their community, whether that be through social prescribing, or whether that be just through more informally connecting people to the support that's available. And then I'm gonna hand over now, I think, to Emma. I think that's right, Emma.
It's like a relay, isn't it? I don't think I've quite run out of the box for that baton, so that's good. So yeah, so just move this onto the next slide, please, thanks. So why we're using population health management, we've heard tonight that we haven't got it right. We haven't got it right about personalised care. We haven't got it right about outcomes. And we know that by using this approach, we've got the potential to engage people differently around health and identify opportunities beyond treating health and illness and conditions. And if we do that, we'll be able to improve lives. And the conversation that we've just had shows the need for that and the opportunities to help people live better quality lives. We know that by doing population health management, it'll help us manage demand in services. And we know that by doing this, we need to have a diverse team around us. And again, some of the examples we've heard tonight about the police and the work from Healthy Minds and schools, by taking people outside of just one sector, you start and get a rounded picture of individuals and groups of people that show us opportunities to take actions or put interventions in that will help keep people or keep us at the lower end of the triangle, hopefully for as long as possible. So like Nigel mentioned, we've started this in 5 primary care networks last year, or throughout the last year for about 15 months now. And we've just started to be able to measure the impact both on individuals in those groups and the demand for services. Now it's really small scale, so it's looking at 20 to 40 people, but really personalising that approach and thinking about the intervention to make. So the work that Nigel mentioned in Upper Calder Valley around the frailty, we've started to see reduction in sort of health markers for those individuals we've been working with, and a reduction in demand on GP appointments. And in central with the diabetes, the social prescribing link workers within the PCNs have started working with Active Calderdale to really support and handhold some people into take action to manage some of their rising risk of diabetes. And that again is just starting to be evaluated for the impact that has on life. So the next steps really is that we want to do this thinking about across borough. So we want to do some things that look at how we take that population health management approach, and you've heard about the Burnt Bridges work, so we're going to look at taking this approach into answering some of the recommendations within that, so multi-disadvantaged groups. And we're also going to look at children and young people and that rising risk of self-harm and suicide, alongside the looking at younger years and the potential lost years of life, of development because of COVID. So that's just a bit of a brief where we've got to. It's a start. We're not saying we've achieved it all, And the next slide, the remainder of the presentation is really focused on sharing some examples as to how we've started working in an integrated way to deliver services differently. So if you think about Deb's triangle, this is more at a service end than the bottom two. So we've given you a bit of what we're doing in the bottom 2/3, and this is more at the top 2/3. I'm not good at maths. So I think it's Nigel next.
So yeah, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about our enhanced health in care home program. So this is working across the whole of the borough and as involving all of the care homes that exist in Calderdale. And what we've basically developed is within each of the PCN footprint, we've developed a PCN-based care home team. And that team is working across organizational boundaries and is made up of a variety of different professionals, so particularly our care coordinators, our clinical pharmacy teams, GPs, advanced nurse practitioners, the care home staff themselves are involved in it, and then we also have active input from the team that's provided by Calderdale. By CHFT, which is the Quest team, which is a nursing team that supports our care homes. And we've developed the concept of a weekly home round. So in each PCN, there is a home round that happens each week, and care homes are bringing patients, bringing their clients to that home round, where we are, the patients are discussed with that multidisciplinary team. And very much taking a proactive approach and reviewing the patients before they start to become poorly. So the idea is to try and get in there early, to do something a bit more proactive rather than waiting for patients to become poorly and need a reactive response. Now, obviously, that's still going to happen, but this principle is to get in there first and be much more proactive in the care of this vulnerable group of patients. Very active in producing proper care plans for the patients as well. On top of that weekly home round that happens on a PCN basis, we've also got a much more specialist Calderdale multidisciplinary team meeting, which Quest, the Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust team of nurses run in conjunction with geriatrician input from the specialist end at the hospital. So patients can be moved seamlessly from that local home round into the big multidisciplinary team ward round. And it's really enhancing the way that care is delivered to this very vulnerable group of people who are our most important people in our community and often the very, very most vulnerable people. So a much more service that's wrapped around them rather than waiting for them to become poorly and end up in hospital. And then the other exciting thing that we've done in the last year or so is we've expanded this to now cover all the learning disabilities care homes as well, because they weren't covered by Quest previously. And so we've managed to expand and cover those homes as well. So that's the enhanced care home model, which is still developing. So then we can move on to the next slide. And I think we're then moving to Michael.
Yeah, I was going to just share a case study, but no, it's fine. We'll move through to Michael.
Okay, cheers, Bo. Thank you. Just move on this slide to the next slide, if that's okay. So one of the other examples in terms of how we work in an integrated way is this urgent community response team. So this is a project that is currently in flight. As you're probably all aware, members on the call aware, that we have significant challenges with the resilience of our urgent emergency care system. So the resilience of our ED departments. We've known for years, not just in our local place and local footprint, that there's a reasonably large percentage of patients who come to A&E who don't need to be in A&E, and we can do things better for these patients. So really, beyond all the detail and the naming convention of urgent community response is about how do we work between health and care and adult social care to make sure those patients who don't need to be in hospital and being conveyed to ED can be treated in the community, can be managed in the community. So it's really two relatively simple components to this. There's an immediate healthcare response within 2 hours. So this is a team of advanced clinical practitioners and advanced nurse practitioners who will receive a call from 111 GP, etc., and they will go and see that patient in their home, in that care home, within 2 hours. and they will have the skills and competency to assess them and understand, do they need to be conveyed to hospital? Can they be managed in their care home? Can they be managed in a home? And probably as importantly, once they've assessed them, make sure that the appropriate wrapper of care is around them as soon as they leave the home. So some of that will be working with Ian and colleagues from an adult social care perspective to make sure we have the right reablement capacity to support that team. So yeah, so I think what that slide shows is potentially kind of free, relatively, it's a bit simplistic, but it's useful in terms of communication. So I think the top line is that emergency pathway. That bottom line is essentially the planned care pathway, and that middle ground is what's new about the urgent community response team. So you can see that left to right from 999, 111, single point of access. And I think that's useful from a conveying to teams about what's different about this. So if we just move on to the next slide. So this is one of the biggest investments. So I think we presented probably about a year ago to Scrutiny about what the future was around transforming community services. It's been an undervalued service, as I'm sure you're aware, and it's been underinvested in. So this is one of the early signs of increased investment off the back of the kind of prioritisation that's been placed on out of hospital care in the long-term plan. It came, the model itself came off the back of a number of the vanguards, so the new models of care work that went on up and down the country, and they evidence clear benefits in terms of patient outcomes experience, reducing conveyancing to ED. So part of that was then how do we scale that across the country, and that is essentially what turned into the urgent community response proposal. I've talked about the 2 hours, I've talked about assessing and treating people in their own home. I think the important thing about this, and one of the challenges from an ED perspective, is it has to be 7 days. You can't do this on a Monday to Friday, and it needs to cover a fair chunk of that 24-hour cycle. So this is an 8 to 8 service. There is ambitions about it being a 24/7 service, but baby steps and all that, we have to get the service up and running with a view then to how we scale it to 24/7. Going back to that integrated piece, it's not just about healthcare. So if we just stand back up, it is about trying to make sure that we work in an integrated way with adult social care and reablement, and they're the kind of timelines in the bottom right in terms of what we're aiming to do in terms of going live for December. So if we just move on to the next slide, so that's what we're in place. So talking about, and this really links to the previous agenda item. So as well as investment in the community, there is a program of work around investing more in preventative and anticipatory care. So we probably, from a system perspective, we know we invest at that sharp end of the cycle, and we don't invest anywhere near enough at that bottom end of the cycle. So linking to Deb's and Emma's presentation in terms of that population health, there will be funding coming in anticipatory care through the Aging Well programme to support that personalised care planning approach. So that diagram there at the person at the centre of it and trying to make sure they're involved in decision making around their care is critical to this. So if we just go on to the next slide. So the principles about it, we've discussed. I won't repeat that. I won't repeat the point about using population health management and indicators. I think the important bit about this, about that blurred boundaries working, is it's centred on the patient. It's not centred on the provider. It's not about CHFT. It's not about the PCNs. It's not about the local authority. It's a holistic biopsychosocial assessment of needs, and then trying to make sure you basically configure the services and you wrap the services around that individual's needs. And you do it in a way which identifies needs early doors rather than too late. And this explicitly links in with some of what we discussed before. So when Nigel talked about the enhanced health in care home, that's about shifting towards more proactive personalised care planning. And likewise, the urgent community response, they should be receiving the personalised care plan from this work. So when they go into crisis, you've got that personalised care planning, whether it's end of life, children living well. They've got that information, and you only get that by having the foundations of anticipatory care in place, because if you don't have that in place, you will always be in a reactive state. So really that's just articulating that what we discussed on a previous agenda item. This is how we're practically and operationally trying to deliver it on the ground by working in an integrated way across agencies. I mean, that's a powerful message, I think. So, and I think next slide is probably questions for members, I suspect.
Yeah, I think we've come to the end of our presentations. So thank you for listening to us.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that, and thank you for the presentation and giving an oversight. I guess the biggest issue I have in relation to all this is actually the name. I really can't get my head around the name. I don't know where it's come from. And I really would like you to go back to the board and just say, can we have a simplistic name that actually means something to people? Because it means, I've read it several times, and I get what you're doing. The slides are brilliant, but I do not get the title whatsoever. And if
I think we're aware of that, and I think we have discussed changing the name.
Good, absolutely fantastic. What you've shown us tonight is brilliant. So, but you know, it's just like, whoa.
We're having a reset session in October to really reinvigorate and bring the board together. And I think naming it will be something that will come out of that. So I reassure you, Councillor.
Fabulous. Well, I hope so. I really do hope so. So thank you for that. Right, Councillor Barnes first of all, then Councillor Hutchinson, then Councillor Kingston. So Councillor Barnes first of all, please.
Well, I had 2 points to make, and my first was going to be dramatic of me banging my head against the desk in regard to the name. So Howard, thank you for preventing me from getting a headache or a migraine later tonight by raising that, because like you, I've read this how many times and I still couldn't tell you what the name is. ACDC or something is about all I got from it. The second point, and thank you for the presentation. I think I'm aware that you're going to come back at a later stage. Particularly, what would be very good would be to see how the UCR launch has gone. An aspect of that. So I understand we're more about the sort of the concept, the ideas behind it, and the presentation added to the report. Because actually, the report, I'm sorry, is as bad as the name. It's too full of jargon, massively full of jargon, and there are some that make no sense. What is it? Place-based. What is it? Where is it? Place-based digital maturity. Please, can anybody explain what that is? This fails what I believe is the person in the street test. We should be able to put these reports, give these reports to people walking past our houses, and they understand it, and they don't. And we sit on these committees, we're heavily involved in this process, and even we don't understand it. So please, A, change the name. Thank you for researching that. B, make these reports a lot more simple, a lot more readable, a lot more understandable to people. One final thing, I showed this to somebody, and they said on page 7, you've got that project areas within the delivery plan, and yet you start off with the 6 weeks plus left to right, then the 72 to 6 weeks, and then the 0 to 72. Our eyes normally read left to right, so actually the 0 to 72 should be on the first part. Because that's how you normally read things, as you look left would be the most recent, and then the furthest away is on the right. But that's what I'm saying. Just please change the report, make it a bit more simple, make it readable, and the name. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you. Nigel, do you want to comment on that, or do you want to take those comments on board?
I'm going to take it on the chin.
You're going to take it on the chin. Well done, you. Right, I'll bring in the next probably challenging question, Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, we know that care is delivered by people, not by flowcharts. Back in 2018, the CCGs commissioned, I'm sure at no small cost, from McKinsey, the Right Care, Right Time, Right Place report, which explained what was needed to actually absorb the demographic growth within Calderdale and Greater Huddersfield that would otherwise require an additional 43 hospital beds by the end of 2023. We might not have agreed with every element of that plan, but at least it was a plan, and it fleshed out what capacity in staffing and what capacity in community beds would be required to actually absorb that capacity and support the Calderdale Cares plan. It would be really useful when you come back in November for you to explain to us where we are on that plan, or whether it's been superseded by another plan, and if so, where we are on that plan, but to have some confidence that we have the capacity within out-of-hospital care to cope with the demand that there is. So can I make that plea for your next visit in November, that we actually see some of the meat on the bones rather than the aspirations.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. I'm going to bring in Neil Smithwaite from the Calderdale CCG at this stage.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the question, Colin. So I think you're aware through the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee with Kirklees, we've done a huge amount of that report. And it's good that you as a committee want it to come here, because we've not really been sure where you've wanted to receive that information. What I don't want to be doing is duplicating what we do at the Joint Overview Scrutiny and what we do here locally. So we've got a detailed Calderdale report that we can more than happy bring some of that information back, but I don't want to be doing it at the same place as Overview and Scrutiny about right care, right place, because whilst they're linked, they can be two different things, the reconfiguration of the hospital and what we're doing in community services. But we've got a detailed position statement of where we are against those McKinsey's recommendation with regards to the investment that's gone in, the amount of money that's gone into additional roles. And Michael sort of touched on some of the sort of new money that's coming in for the urgent care response, which is on top of what we were expecting when we wrote that report for the joint scrutiny as well. So we can more than happy bring that back. I just don't want to do it in more than one place.
I'm afraid you may be aware, Neil, that that report that was brought to the Joint Scrutiny Committee got a very frosty reception.
So we took a summary to the Joint Overview and Scrutiny report. We have a very detailed place-based report that we're more than happy to have a conversation about at place, but it's working out where that right environment is. So I'm happy you've asked for it here locally, and we can bring that detailed Calderdale report here locally, which is different to the summary you received at the Joint Overview and Scrutiny.
We'll have a debate on that later, Colin. I think it's a point worth discussing, because I think it is, if we want somebody to come here, we would like and welcome the opportunity to come to the scrutiny voluntary with that information.
We've got a detailed response and that shows the amount of money, the investment. What it doesn't do is give you assurance that there is adequate capacity, because I think what we're seeing post-COVID is the demand and capacity aren't meeting each other. We continue to invest best where we can, but it is not going to give a definitive we have 100% the capacity we need in the community. But it does build on our Calderdale Cares and the community perspectives that we've had in Calderdale for a number of years, and the presentation that you've just had.
Councillor Hutchinson, you want to come back in on that one?
The money is essential, but it's the capacity that actually delivers the services, and that's what we need, the confidence that that capacity is there. And quite honestly, that is required actually at both levels, because there is one hospital trust that provides services across both areas. And so, they have an impact both at Calderdale level, but also across the Calderdale Greater Huddersfield level.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. We'll take that away and make sure we get the right reports to the right place. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you, Councillor Badborough. I just wanted to underline what Councillor Barnes said earlier about how shockingly heavy with jargon this report was. I want to underline it by talking about who I am. I was a registered nurse. I was a secondary school teacher. I have a first-class honours degree. I have a master's degree. I didn't understand the report. That means it's shockingly inaccessible. Go away. If you're going to use jargon, please explain it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kingston. When I first joined council, everything was totally full of jargon, and we've eventually trained people to go away and come back to simplify it for us. So let's hope they do that. So you're coming back to scrutiny later on in the year. We very much welcome you, as always, as we always do with most people that come to the report. We don't like anyone to go away upset, so very much note this report at the moment. Note that hopefully you're going to come back with a more snappy name so that everyone can understand, and the report will be simplified so we can all also understand it. So very much appreciate the time taken to present this evening, and the time that actually been quite patient in the background whilst we're going through the suicide prevention. So thank you for attending this particular item. So we'll move on to item number 7, which is the COVID-19 update. Ian, would you like to slightly update us on this, babe? I'm going to challenge you to 5 minutes in the maximum.
Right, I shall try my best in 5 minutes. And I know it's been a really kind of full-on agenda with some very heavy subjects. So we thought we would focus the kind of COVID oral update this time just on what's been happening in the social care picture. I think it just might be useful just to remind ourselves that the most up-to-date rolling 7-day figure for Calderdale is 396 per 100,000. So, and that is becoming fairly persistent. There's a slight fluctuation, but it's not going up dramatically, but more importantly, it's not going down dramatically. So community prevalence is quite high in Calderdale. And I think what we've seen over the last few weeks is that's reflecting in some of our care settings, particularly residential and nursing homes. So just to assure councillors, we currently have 2 outbreaks in residential settings. We have what's described, and an outbreak is when there's more than one case. We've also got 5 providers that are classified as having clusters, and a cluster is described as there is more than one case, but it's not related or can't be traced back to workforce transmission or working practice. These are isolated cases where the transmission can't be related to the actual setting or workplace. And we also have 6 providers with single cases of COVID. So we know that COVID is still impacting on our social care provision. I thought it'd be useful just to kind of just describe a little bit in terms of where we think we are in the kind of vaccination programme in our care settings to offset that. So in terms of our older people's homes, 86% of staff have had the first jab, and 78% of staff have had their second jab. And in terms of residential homes for learning disability, first dose staff is 89% and 84% of second jab. And I'm focusing on staff for a very important reason, because as members will know, government have decided that it will be a mandatory requirement to work in residential care settings, both for older people and learning disability, to have the vaccine and to be double vaccinated. The regulation comes into force on the 11th of November and became a requirement in July. So there was a 16-week period given to adult social care across the country to ensure that everybody is double vaccinated by the 11th of November. And a critical date coming up will be the 16th of September, which is in order to meet the 11th of November deadline, all those staff remaining without the vaccine would need to have their first dose by the first jab by the 16th of September. So we are continually working with those settings to make sure that we understand the risks associated with each care home in terms of how many people still need to be vaccinated. And we are working with our partners to make sure that people's take up. We have done a piece of work just to understand what we think the level of risk might be to our care homes. And at the moment, we are anticipating we might lose 120 people across the whole of the residential nursing provision in Calderdale because they may choose not to have the second dose. And because it becomes a statutory requirement, somebody who isn't double vaccinated by the 11th of November, unless there's a medical exemption, won't be allowed to continue to practice in the front line. We already know that care homes and the care provision sector in general has a high level of vacancy rates. Actually, in Calderdale, we perform better than the national average. So, for example, in older people's homes, we currently have about 10% vacancy rates. Clearly, if we have 120 more people leaving, that vacancy rate will increase. So we do need to try and work with our providers and staff to make sure that that is well understood. I think I've got a couple more minutes, I think, if I wasn't right about the timing. Yeah. I think it's probably just useful to kind of just talk a little bit about the outbreaks in care homes, because sadly, we have recently had one more care death in one of our homes. And obviously our thoughts go out to the family of that person, but also the care staff. The particular home where the death occurred had not had an outbreak throughout the whole of the pandemic. And unfortunately, with the Delta variant being more transmissible, they had quite a high number of residents. Actually, 100% of those residents, including the person that passed away, all had the second jab. This particular person, I think, it does tie into the presentation we've just heard, they did have a significant underlying health condition, which obviously COVID exacerbated, and that unfortunately person passed away. So the total deaths in our care home settings from the beginning of the pandemic has reached 80 people. In the recent CQC report on care home deaths, Calderdale was the lowest, second lowest death rate in the Yorkshire and Humber. And in terms of the wider country, we were 42nd lowest. And I want to pay testament to our care providers who, through really difficult circumstances, really did focus on infection control and ensuring outbreaks didn't occur. I don't think we are out of the woods yet with the Delta variant. I am hoping that we will continue to work collaboratively with the sector, but I just thought that would be a useful kind of overview for you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ian. That's really, really useful. I think it would be quite useful if you could possibly send an email on behalf of the board to the care homes and providers to acknowledge the hard work that they've carried out over this period, and that we do acknowledge, because actually often we ask all these very searching questions and X, Y, and Z. So I think it would be quite important to build some bridges in relation to effective communication going forward.
I'm more than happy to do that. And I think just to kind of end on a bit of a high note, I think some of you will have seen in the media today that one of our care home residents in one of our homes, Sandhome Fold, had his 101st birthday today. So I'm sure Scrutiny would like to join us in wishing Jack a happy 101st birthday. I think it's testament to the quality of care that people get, that people still can have really rich lives even through the pandemic.
Absolutely, I do understand the mayor visited him as well, so that was great.
They did indeed.
Well. Yeah, no, super good. I hope he had a wonderful day. It looked good on Facebook actually. The pictures and all the greeting cards that he must have got was quite amazing. So yeah, quite an achievement, isn't it? Wow.
Over 1,000 cards.
Yeah, absolutely. Super. So I think I'm going to close item number 7, because we do get regular updates in terms of emails about data and stuff like that. So I'm going to let you off the hook here tonight, Deb. So but thank you anyway. Which leads us on nicely to the work programme, which has been circulated. We're constantly updating it. Mike Barnes and myself, Councillor Barnes, we currently have regular meetings with various officials, and we're building up communication with various people as well. So we're working extremely well together, updating the work programme. What I will say, following item number 5, we'll be getting together as an informal group to discuss some of the recommendations of the suicide prevention. So it leaves me to say, actually, enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you so much, everyone, for partaking in the debate. Extremely useful, extremely important.
Yes. Councillor Hutchinson's raised a...
Councillor Hutchinson.
I do apologise. I just wanted clarification as whether we were going to be seeing the suicide action plan
Yes, basically that's the intention, hopefully. And Debs is going to make a comment on that.
Yeah, just apologies that the action plan hasn't yet been sought through the formal approval process, but I've just been in correspondence with Sue. The suggestion will be that we'll circulate that as a draft to members of this committee and to the children's board as well for your comments before it goes through that approval process. We'd really value your comments on that action plan.
Super, that's brilliant, Debs. That's exactly what we want to see. So which comes on to the work programme. Always open for suggestions. If you think there's something needs to be added onto the work programme, always a bit of an open door. But as members, I really appreciate your time tonight. It's been a bit of a longer meeting, but it's been really productive and really useful meeting, and hopefully we'll get some really good outcomes from this. So thank you, members, and I officially close the meeting. So I have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, thank you.
Bye, Howard.
Bye, thank you. Take care. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Well done, Howard.
Good stuff. No, that's good. I think we're probably still live, so thank you very much, Janet.
Janet? Oh, are we still live?